So I'm releasing this talk. This is the talk I gave with Skyscript back in September about the astrology of America over the next decade or so. Just a bit of a disclaimer. I mean, this talk was designed to be kind of an intense, mundane astrology talk. I go through some cycles that relate to warfare and America. And so I want you to just like trigger warning. If you're not wanting to go into that and look at some of those cycles, it's okay. But just know that's what I do in this video. And part of the spiritual kind of philosophy of seeing it is that, what's the alternative? Ignore it and just pretend like it doesn't exist. I don't think that's the way to go. I think we want to be with it, and we want to try to what we call transmute it. By seeing the cycle, we sort of can change it, maybe understanding that it may exist. I think if we didn't see it and we were unaware and maybe blissfully unaware, there would be some kind of reenactment, potentially some kind of negative reenactment. And so my hope is that you raise awareness. We can look at these cycles that have been quite intense around warfare in America with the hope of praying for peace and transmuting it through love. And there's a whole section in this talk I want to bring your attention to about my spiritual practices that I think can help us during this time. And it was very important for me to record that because the spiritual and reality frame is as important as seeing the astrological cycle. So check those sections out there at the end. They'll be time-stamped. Anyhow, I hope you enjoy this. Take care and talk soon.
A presentation on the regional forecast for the United States. I've worked with S.J. Anderson on, I think, a small handful of projects before, taking a look at mundane forecasts, and I think most notably around the time of Russia's invasion into Ukraine. And I have to say that S.J. is very well researched. He's on top of, just everything right at his fingertips. I know that you're all in for a treat. Please help me welcome S.J. Anderson, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, Wade, thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm real happy to be here and just great to be with everybody today to talk about a pretty heavy topic, a heavy topic. I mean, this is some of the most intense astrology I think that's on my mind. Wade says that there's already been some heavier conversations about the future of Europe. So, anyhow, let's just dive right in. There's a lot here, and we'll have more time for questions at the end. And I do a lot of this kind of contextualization through the presentation. So let me just start here. America's Great Transformation. The title of the talk, America's Great Dark Night of the Soul, or the Great Dark Night of the American Soul, a Decade of Death and Rebirth, 2023 to 2033. These are kind of loose dates. It's just, that's what a decade is, 10 years. So that's why I put it here. You'll see the coverage in the talk is quite a lot wider than just a 10-year period. First thing I want to do is start here. I always start whenever I talk about mundane astrology that has some intensity with the ISAR ethical standards and guidelines. So of the International Society of Astrological Research, published, revised in 2003. And their website is down. They're currently going through a website, refresh. But this is from a blog post called Chest of Secrets, and they republished the ethics rules. But negative predictions, here's from the rule. Negative predictions are tempered with disclaimers. So here are the key disclaimers. It's important to do this. It's not just perfunctory. Astrology is not an exact science. Keep that in mind. Astrology is about interpreting meaning. It's about creating meaning and interpreting things. There's a lot of loose, space there in how we interpret things, and astrologer to astrologer can be wildly different. This is the most important one, I think. B, astrological variables can manifest in differing events of similar meaning. AKA, sometimes things are resonant, they rhyme, but they're not exact. And so what this means is that we have room here as we look at some of the historical cycles I'm about to dive into for things to repeat but not be the same. And I think this is a great comforting disclaimer from the ISAR rules, because it doesn't mean things have to be exactly how they've been in the past, which I'm hoping that won't be the case for what we're about to enter into collectively. And then the third one, and I've never understood this one, maybe someone can in the audience, but astrology cannot predict with absolute certainty the outcome of future astronomical events. I never got this because we're not predicting astronomical events as astrologers. Maybe, someone is, but it's not like we're saying there's going to be a comet in 5 years that'll emerge. Maybe some people are doing that, but I think they may mean something else here that might deserve a rewrite. Maybe I'll suggest that with my ISAR friend at some point. Okay. So there you go. Those are the disclaimers. Still in this little introductory phase of the presentation, but this is the next thing I want to go into. Remember, and this is key, starting in 2020 on the solstice. So this is a tweet I published on the 3rd of December, 2020. The mean conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, the mean conjunctions and the true conjunctions will be continuously in air signs now, starting with that winter solstice conjunction. And they will, both the means conjunctions and the true conjunctions are only in air until 2159, when there is that first true conjunction in Scorpio. If you don't understand what the difference between mean and true conjunctions are, I'm not going to go into that here. Just know there's different ways we measure these conjunctions. And the main point here that I want to start us off with is that we're in an age of air now. We have not been in an age of air for any of the stuff that we're going to talk about here in terms of the cycles that are going to help us understand the moment we're in. The previous versions of those cycles were in ages of earth and fire. And so what it means is that when we look at how a cycle will replicate in our current epoch, it may be that it's different. It doesn't have to be the same. We're freed from the kind of curse of the past, you might say, because we're now in an age of air. And I want to go to Agrippa, Cornelius Agrippa, from his 3 books of occult philosophy, translation by J. Freck or Freak. And Agrippa writes of the air element, many philosophers were of the opinion that air is the cause of dreams and of many other impressions of the mind through the prolonging of images or similitudes. And what I take from all of this is that we're in an age of air. The digital technology is classic air element. So much of our world is mediated through the digital world, simulation, simulacra, Baudrillardian simulacra. And so what it means is that we might be able to have wars of the mind, wars on the screen, information wars, and it's all digital. This might be a kind of saving grace where we don't have to have real wars in the real world. It can be kind of these simulated wars. And I'm real excited about the age of air for this particular reason. Doesn't mean that it won't be as intense. They might still be as intense, maybe psychically, but maybe there's something where it's different than the age of earth or the age of fire that came before. Okay, so first section of the talk, Pluto and Aquarius in the U.S. Pluto return 2023 through 2044. These are the dates when Pluto will be in Aquarius. So that's why those dates are listed there. And let's just jump in. I want to start with Richard Tarnas, the best astrologer to look at significations of the outer planets. In my opinion, he's kind of the guy. And what does he say about Pluto? He says it's powerfully compelling, extreme in its intensity, arising from the depths, possessing a prodigious titanic dimension, empowering, intensifying, and compelling whatever it touches on a massive scale. When I was writing this, I was listening to some Leonard Cohen. They've summoned up a thundercloud, Leonard Cohen quote from his song Anthem. The notion here is that Pluto is deeply intense things, and we're about to have a massively, deeply intense experience with Pluto in America because of this Pluto return. Let's start here, 9/11. Big event, right? This is America's entry into the Plutonic underworld. In my view, it's the only time Pluto hit the ascendant of the Sibley chart, because Pluto in the birth of America was here in Capricorn. It took all those years for it to come to hit that ascendant. And what happens right when Pluto's in that same degree of the ascendant of the Sibley chart? You get the September 11th events, which is kicks off an acceleration into this Plutonic cycle as climax, both geopolitical and financial. I saw this and I'm just like, wow. It's hard to not want to use Pluto when you see that one, and you know how Plutonic it was for America. Here's an article from Toronto Sun, 2016. A commentator was quoting some scholars who had said basically New Pearl Harbor, 9/11 was a new Pearl Harbor. It was a game changer. Basically, there was a brief borderless world. Remember, internet was coming online in the late 90s, kind of this brief borderless kind of new world. 9/11 happens, boom, mythological moment that all of that kind of burgeoning borderless world comes to an end with 9/11. It's an enormous flashpoint. So that's, you don't need this slide to really know that. Maybe some people didn't live through it that are younger, but as someone who did, it was a extremely profound and deep turning of the energetic in the collective conscious and unconscious. It's kind of pre 9/11, post 9/11. And what do we have? Let's go back to the Sibley chart. I want to just delineate this a little bit more. Post 9/11, what happened was you had the fervent patriotism in America, the justified wars of economic expansion and aggression. Okay, that's, I think, an undeniable frame. Of course, there's other frames, and you can see when I work, I really try to see all sides. Some people might say, well, it was a defensive war. I think most will agree it went beyond that. And it went into some pretty dark places in terms of economic expansionism and aggression, wars for oil, so-called. But look at the Sibley chart. See what happens with the transit. Any transit is going to trigger the natal promise. And in the Sibley chart, you have that Sag rising. Look where Jupiter is in the 8th house, the domicile lord of Sagittarius. And so what happened is that Pluto triggered this avarice and this kind of appetites for others' resources, which would be a classic Jupiter in the 8th signification. What do I have here? Sagittarian drive to devour resources, the 8th house, the instinctual Dionysian. Taurus mentions Pluto being Dionysian, this kind of unleashed just desire and this instinctual kind of depth urge. And so that was part of what got unleashed. Another way to look at America, is stolen land. I put that in quotes because that's, of course, legalisms. But basically, America's created, people were already here. And a lot of the corporate governance structures from Europe then basically invade America. It's a colonial landmass, right? It becomes the global reserve currency. America becomes the key holder, the kind of lineage holder of the global reserve currency. We still live in that regime, the US dollar, petrodollar regime that may be coming to an end here. But that's part of the 8th house in the Sibley. Oh, no, my slide went, but that's part of the 8th house in the Sibley chart. It's debt and other people's resources. And you can see that promise is a huge part of what came to fruition for America. Here's a study from Brown University. They published this in September 1st, 2021. Again, it relates to 8th house, where you have that stellium in the Sibley chart, Jupiter, ruler of the ascendant, in the 8th house, in that stellium. 9/11 hits the ascendant. You have these plutonic emergences post 9/11, triggering that natal promise. Costs of the 20-year war on terror, 8 trillion and about 1 million dead, a little under 1 million. That's actually strictly people who died in combat. Millions died if you look at the economic impact of the war on terror and like innocent children and things with sanctions and all of that other stuff. Millions and millions died. And it's nasty stuff, but it's Pluto. That's what Pluto is. So we're living in the wake of that. We're just coming out of that war on terror and into this new age. But it's a great example of what Pluto did to America and to the Sibley chart. The next thing I want to look at is when Pluto entered Capricorn, the 2nd house, where it is now, and it's just finishing at its time here. You had the stock market bottoming in March 2009, just after Pluto had come into Capricorn and settled there for good. It's called the gate of Hades, the 2nd house, the second whole sign house in the ancient system. And it's because that wealth can support, resources support, but you remove resources and you get death, right? Lack of wealth kills. And I think that's key to when we think about the 2nd house. And certainly with Pluto, the lord of the underworld, in that 2nd house, we're going to have to deal with the kind of darker side of any house topic where Pluto traverses. And that's what you saw with this Pluto entering Capricorn, which also is the sign of the Sibley Pluto. So we began that Pluto return back in 2008, whole sign, and we're still in it now. I think about Ben Rickett. This is a character that Brad Pitt played in the film The Big Short, released in 2015. If you've never seen it, excellent picture. In that movie, there's this great scene. He turns to these young kids. They just made a killing off the crash. And he says, every 1% unemployment goes up. 40,000 people die. Did you know that? He's basically telling these kids, like, stop celebrating. People are dying. You just made a bunch of money off this, your trade, but a bunch of like innocent people are going to die because of the economic consequences. That's the gate of Hades, the 2nd house. The destruction of wealth kills. Back to Pluto being in that 2nd house now. Okay, so we're in that now. We saw it hit the 1st house. Now we're in the 2nd house. And this is just another example of that. The Lehman collapse happened here, 15 September 2018. Pluto has snuck back into Sagittarius, in 2008. Lehman collapses, and then Pluto comes back into Capricorn for good right around here as the stock market's bottoming. And that's that transition, that crisis of Pluto transition. That is a great chart example of 2008. All right, let's come back here. Where are we? This is more on the same topic about the Pluto return. Here we are, U.S. Sibley, I've talked about some of this already, but it's the America deck game being exposed. That's one of the things I wanted to highlight here. Right as we get into like October 2023, you see Pluto stationing direct for the last time in this degree, where it is natally in the Pluto in the Sibley chart. And I want to just keep in mind how important the money houses are in the Sibley chart, because you have the Lords of Capricorn, Saturn in Sibley 11, which is a money house, and then Mars in Sibley 7, but then in Gemini, but then Mercury ruling Gemini, you're brought back into the money house of the 8th, and then Venus ruling Libra by domicile, you're brought back into the 8th. And so you can see there's a lot of 5 of the 7 traditional planets in Sibley are in these money houses. The 11th is kind of the global networks, and then the 8th is the other people's resources. And that's basically one way to just think about America. It's like, it's all about other people's resources on the global scale. Now you have Pluto here, angular. And we're seeing, I think, a big story of the Pluto return has been the America debt game being exposed. You'll see here that the BRICS Bank is new. It just came out during this period. And already there's a rush in the so-called global South to join the BRICS Bank, because they've basically been victimized by the America holding the catbird seat of the global financial system. Everybody has to buy dollars to feed their populations. And I don't think America's handled that privilege very well. And so you can see a lot of nations are wanting to join what they might consider to be a more egalitarian network. That's part of the American Pluto return. And it's certainly part of Pluto and Aquarius themes, as we'll see, which later, resisting the empire, Pluto and Aquarius theme. Look at this, which has been a major part of Pluto in Capricorn, in the gate of Hades, second house of the Sibley chart. Workers' share of corporate income. This is in America, 1979 through 2003. Look at this. Workers are losing the share of the corporate income, meaning that as the corporations thrive, workers get pushed aside, get exploited. I have here Plutonian crisis of plutocracy. Big part of the second house Pluto return for America. Here's a chart you see going around online a lot. Price changes since the year 2000. Look at this. Hospital services up over 200%. College tuition up almost 200%. College textbooks the same. Medical care services, childcare up over 100%. These are all core things. Education and healthcare. Food and beverage almost up 100%. Housing almost up 100%. Of course, all of the little electronic toys are way down, but workers are getting less of the pie, and all of those core expenses are going way up. It's a big gate of Hades, Pluto return, Plutonian crisis of plutocracy for America. This is a chart I've seen recently, U.S. real wages since 1965. Look at this. Real wages are adjusted for inflation. Real wages are down since 1965. As the wealth has increased, again, the pie for most of the population is less than it was. And what you're seeing right now as the Pluto return in 2022 has been exact. Look at this, U.S. life expectancy at birth. Here is UK in blue, Japan in pink, Europe in orange. So this is the pandemic years. Of course, you might expect life expectancy to go down during that pandemic crisis point. The other places bounce back. Now, not Japan, but Japan didn't really even sink that much lower. That's within the normal range of Japan here. Look at America, no bounce back. It's continued to just plummet. Let me repeat what this is. U.S. life expectancy at birth. It's now falling, and that's a pretty dramatic fall, and we're in a free fall. And so we go back to Pluto being, Lord of the underworld in that second house, resources key to life itself. Remember that Ben Rickett quote, there's some real crisis in America. I mean, that would be the main theme, economic crisis. Americans will probably know what I'm talking about, but you're living there, you kind of understand how hard it is to survive there, but people are really crashing and dying. Opioid crisis. I mean, there's a number of potential causes, but it fits the symbolism. Second house gate of Hades, the materiality supports life itself. Okay, let's keep pushing. Pluto's direct station, 10 October 2023. That's about to happen. I already talked about how that's the right in that degree here. But what was I going to say? Oh, it exits on Halloween. So 2023. Pluto will leave that degree, which means October 2023 is maybe in one way the end of the Pluto return. Pluto will never return to that degree for hundreds of years. And so look for October 2023 to be some kind of major thing around these Pluto return themes. Keep in mind, there is one more direct station in Capricorn. It's 2 September 2024 to 19 November 2024. So we get one more return to these Pluto themes that I've just laid out. I'm going to go through some more of these now. U.S. Pluto return themes remain in focus. And these are the ones I kind of want to highlight. Who controls the system? Anytime you have economic exploitation, you have to say who controls the system. Is it egalitarian? Is it democratic, right? If the plutocracy and there's these kind of dominant forces that control a system, you kind of question if you're living in a democracy. There's that famous Princeton study from, I think, 2015, where these social scientists, I should have a slide on that. I did, and I've tweeted a lot about it, but they basically say it's an oligarchy, not a democracy. Voting doesn't matter. These are Princeton experts who have run their social science, expertise, science, and they've got a case that they actually showed whatever party you pick doesn't matter, that the special interests that control the system, they determine policy. Now, I know people might want to push back on that conclusion, but this is all Pluto return stuff in the second house. Who runs the system? Who counts the votes? And so I just want to point out that in 2022, as we had those exact hits, the triple pass of the Pluto return, you had the Smith Special Counsel investigation, Attorney General Merrick Garland on November 18th, 2022, obviously brought these charges against Trump. They investigated Trump, mishandling of records, J6 Capitol attack, all of that stuff, which is, again, questions of democracy. Is there a kind of fascist takeover that's threatening democracy, or is it not democratic and there is no kind of voting system? It really doesn't matter. The themes are in play, no matter, and I'll say more about that in a second. Here, what are the possible outcomes? Trump might not even be allowed to run again. He could be in jail. And we're talking about 2023, 2024, just as Pluto's finishing out its time in Capricorn. This would fit the symbolism. So there's this court case that's happening. The disqualification clause was written for people like the ex-president who gave aid and comfort to enemies of the country. Trump can and should be disqualified from running for the president under the 14th Amendment. There's a chorus of people claiming this or saying this should be the case. There's a lawsuit actually that's trying to get him disqualified under the 14th Amendment. But that would fit the symbolism and be unprecedented. Opposition leader, most popular, politician, or one of the most in the country, arrested and put in jail. Think about the shockwave that would send to the rest of the world in terms of, is America even a democracy? And of course, other people will claim it's necessary because these are enemies of the country. And so, but it hits to the heart of the theme, right? Who controls the materiality of the country? That's that second house of materiality. What's the deep truth about it? You also then have, of course, from the other side, right? Is it a corrupt democracy because of Biden? Been in power for all this time, and there's the idea of 10% for the big guy, right? These are the claims made by the other camp, that Biden is corrupt and has been basically using his position to get a bunch of money and ingratiate himself. Again, Pluto return themes. Who controls the democracy? Who gets access to the wealth of the country? This is going to become more and more in focus as we get into 2023 and 2024, because there is this impeachment. Let me go back here. The House Oversight Committee to hold the first hearing on impeachment on September 28th. That's this coming week. McCarthy announced the inquest like 10 days ago. And so what may happen is that you're going to get, as a possible outcome, well, Biden may be impeached. There could be a Senate trial next year in 2024. At the same time, there's all those Trump criminal trials. You'll have two trials with two of the leaders of both of the parties. And, we'll see with the Biden stuff, maybe more will come out that makes it more than the nothing burger that it already is. There's the whole Burisma boss FBI document that claimed there's all of these conversations, 10% for the big guy. I don't know what it's going to show, but, symbolically, certainly during a Pluto return, that there you would have the deep underworld of the true nature of the controllers of the materiality, aka second house. It would fit if more of this came out, and it fits with Trump. If Trump's arrested or Trump loses at trial, and it was like an attack on democracy in that sense. Now, keep in mind the theme of the last two Pluto and Capricorn U.S. elections has been the elections have been stolen. So in 2016, you had the Russia election interference claims. And that the idea here was the election was stolen from Clinton. So here's two Washington Post articles This is a opinion piece from 2016. The election was stolen. Got a nicer way to say that. And it says, if you don't want to call it stolen, I'd like to hear your suggestion for a more appropriate word. And some of those claims, when you look deeper, like they're claiming that the integrity of the actual machines was hacked by Russia and they changed the votes or something like this. I mean, some of them are as extreme as that. Others are just, the propaganda channels of social media convince people, those memes, Bernie flexing memes and stuff. But the point is, these were claims that were given, credibility in the mainstream that the election was interfered with and stolen. And then, of course, in 2020, you have the voter regularity accusations and people saying election stolen from Trump. I won't go into that because we're living through that now, and you can see all of those claims. But the main point, let me come back. It's a Pluto return, meaning that the Pluto promise of the Sibyl is activated. And those are questions of, who controls the materiality, the processes by which the materiality is spread out in the society. Let me see here. We've got Stop the Steal has moved beyond Trump. This is from Fresh Air, Terry Gross. Now it's threatening future elections. So that there's even a setup. I mean, it's primed to be set up. 2024. No matter how you slice it, in my view, because it's that last election of Pluto and Capricorn, it'll be those 3 elections with Pluto close to the Sibyl Pluto. I imagine there's going to be, everybody's going to say it's stolen. It doesn't matter. So be prepared for that. I think that's going to be part of this election cycle. I want to come back in and, just remind us, I've already said this, but that final moments of the Pluto return by sign is election 2024. And so I imagine all kinds of election integrity issues will be in play. Look at what RFK Jr. is doing right now. He's talking about the rigged DNC, and that may force him to run third party. This is a theme that came up in 2016 as well, when there was that lawsuit by, I think, Bernie people or something, and the DNC just says, look, we can pick whoever we want, as if we're smoking cigars in a back room. They claim that in the lawsuit. Now, that's a real high-level summary of it. You can go read those pleadings for the case. But Kennedy here is claiming that they're basically not going to allow primaries to happen, and they're not going to allow debates to happen. And basically, they're just going to select whoever they want. That alone, setting aside the actual the voting that will happen in November, assuming it does, the process by which the presidential candidates are picked, I think, is set to continue to be exposed here in 2023 and 2024. For maybe remember the superdelegates idea that there's kind of money and plutocracy that controls that process. Okay. But the key point, Pluto return still for election 2024. Get ready for fireworks. And this is the other main point I wanted to bring up here, is that as these Pluto return themes remain in focus, the beautiful example of the multiplicity of the symbol set. This is the beauty of astrology. You can have a symbol set and you can interpret it in different ways. So 2 people looking at the same symbol set have a different interpretation. And what I have here from June 10th this year, as the reactivation of U.S. Sibyl Pluto return happens, because Pluto re-entered Capricorn in June, it doesn't matter what side you're on, red or blue, it doesn't matter. Because whether you are siding with more Trump and Stop the Steal is a threat to democracy, whether you're siding with Biden and Burisma and 10% for the big guys, a threat to democracy, the death to democracy, right? The Pluto and Capricorn gate of Hades questions will be intensifying those narratives. And so that's just something to keep in mind. You can see how powerful the astrology is, no matter how you slice it or what side you want to take. Okay. Other possible outcomes that are unrelated to the political process, which I consider partly second house, because it's the nature of how the materiality is divided and determined. That's all like voting and who votes and who counts the votes and all of that. But there's other economic shocks that could potentially happen to the second house themes. Remember when Pluto first came into Aquarius in 2023, that SBV bank, Silicon Valley Bank, failed almost overnight, 24 hours. And so it was a return to the same thing we saw in 2008 with banking crisis, banking failure. We're not out of the woods yet with potential banking shocks. And I'm concerned, back the rest of this year and then into that little bit into 2024 when Pluto's back in Capricorn, would not be surprised to see these kind of things emerge. All right. This is the thing about the Pluto return. So it's not just Pluto and Capricorn. We've covered that in real granular detail. We're shifting now to look at Pluto and Aquarius. The main thing I want to point out, remember, 2023 to 2044, This is when the new institutions for America were founded. Pluto in Capricorn was just the initial declaration in some of the early phases of the war. Everything we know of as America today, or a lot of the big important pieces, their root chart has Pluto in Aquarius. And this is about the earth element. So Capricorn is of the earth element. That's night sect. It's internalized. It's of the body. It's more inward focused. The air element, this is Aquarius, Saturn's air domicile, is of the day sect, which is the outer world. It's daytime, things we do in the outer world. So it's so-called masculine, right? An air sign. So it's outer world focus. It's the rebuilding of things. It's the new things being established. And that is all yet to happen. And so here we go. Treaty of Paris. This ends the Revolutionary War. Pluto was at 8 degrees, 6 degree minutes of Aquarius. We're going to get a repeat of that the first time in March 2028 and the last time in November 2029 of that Pluto at that degree. So there you go. There's a window of the current timeline when we may be like having a treaty that kind of solves whatever crisis we're about to go into. U.S. Constitution ratified 1788, Pluto at 17 degrees, 28 degree minutes Aquarius. The repeat of that in March 2034, January 2035. That's 12 years out from now, where you get a new institution established. Pluto return of that. George Washington inaugurated, first president, 1789, Pluto, 19 Aquarius, 19 degrees Aquarius. That's March 2035, November 2036. And that's going to be a main theme here. You'll see, it's this rebuilding process that is going to come way later. We're in a destruction phase now, not in a rebuilding phase. That's going to be in the 2030s, according to the symbolism of this cycle and the other cycles we're going to look at. Keep in mind, degree-based returns are a general guide to timing, resonance, and echo. It's not exact predictive importance in my view. Sometimes they can, but more often than not, the degree-based is just saying, hey, the cycle has returned exact, technically, mathematically. Reality, every situation, chart, and timeline is a little bit different because there's always multiple overlapping cycles. I find that it's not often when the exact degree hit happens that everything is resonant. It can be around it. It can be in various orbs, or when the sign transit is even there. So, but I'm offering in this talk the exact degree hits with dates just to get our mind around a possible kind of zone of a timeline. Okay, I'm going to move fast. I'm going to start picking this way up because I'm at 30 minutes in. I'm just going to speed, guys, because there's a lot here. I want to just speed, and then I'll stop and take questions. Remember, Pluto in Aquarius is about revolution shaking foundations. You had the English Reformation in the 16th century. The Catholic Church was the dominant force. It was overthrown by the Protestant Church, the C of E, and basically saying, hey, no, we're not going to be part of that old order. New orders are born. You had in the 18th century Pluto and Aquarius revolutions that shook the foundations, the American Revolution, which we've looked at some, but the French Revolution as well. These are revolutions also against monarchy. So you have the idea of the kind of liberal enlightenment, rights of man, inalienable right concept, that all emerges to push back against monarchy. So the question then becomes, history begs this question, what's the current dominant force in the next 20 years that will face resistance? Is it neoliberal world order? Is it scientism and materialist positivism? Those seem to be dominant. My sense is the world will get more pluralistic and multipolar, maybe even more spiritual in the coming years, because I'm just trying to understand what is the Catholic Church and what is the monarchy that we're resisting now. And it seems to be like neoliberal capitalism and kind of militarism, empire, these types of things. You have the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen this year, when Pluto was in Aquarius, she said, listen, the dollar is going to decrease its share in global reserves. The greenback will still be important, the US dollar, but it's going to decline in importance. So she's admitting that there will be new currency regimes in the new era during Pluto and Aquarius. That's going to change. Petrodollar and US dominance, that will be pushed back against. And that would fit with Pluto return in the second house and then kind of destroying the currency. And then you get into this whole period of rebuilding. New political order, challenging extant systems of domination. The rise of the BRICS is a huge, huge story. During Pluto and Aquarius, this all built. But then it was now Pluto back in Capricorn in August. The BRICS welcomes new members. And the members they welcome are United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, to the backbone of OPEC. So again, petrodollar shifts, BRICS have that development bank. They're going to maybe get away from the dollar. We'll see how this goes, but it certainly fits the symbolism of Pluto and Aquarius of challenging a dominant order. All right. You can check out more from me on this topic. This is one of my frequent collaborators, Mr. Dan Waits. He's got a YouTube channel, World Astrology Report. We've done a deeper breakdown, everything we learned from Pluto's first stint in Aquarius. Just go there and watch that video. Other things we talk about is AI, multipolar world order, UFOs, new religions, new currencies. All right, I'm going to keep pushing you. I see there's a lot of stuff here in the chat. I can't read that because I'm going to get all this out, and then we can come for questions later. Next cycle, I want to look at Uranus and Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer, 2018 through 2040. And this is a huge cycle. We're going to start with Taurus again. What is Uranus? Change, rebellion, freedom, liberation, reform, and revolution. It's unpredictable, disruptive changes. Cosmic trickster. Okay, that's the Uranian. Look at back to the Sibley chart. Uranus and Mars are conjoined in the 7th house of enemy. Self, other. Okay, and what does this mean? Just a delineation without even knowing history. Surprising attacks, right, from another. And of course, that's what America's lived through, surprise attacks, 9/11, Pearl Harbor, others. Uranus and Gemini, this is some of the stuff that's kind of the darkest part here of the talk. And it's not just, this is known. Most people, everybody's been talking about this. But the fact is that when Uranus has been in Gemini, it's always meant United States at war every single time, always. And in fact, the 3 biggest wars in U.S. history happened the last 3 times. It's 3 for 3, that transit. It's hard to like, anyhow, I'm going to come later to like maybe some psychic processing tools and some spiritual processing tools, but it's pretty heavy stuff. I mean, there's no way around it. I wish I could sugarcoat this, but there's no way around it. But I'm going to walk through these wars one by one. First, it was a Revolutionary War. Pluto was in Aquarius, 1774, 1782-ish. And we're going to do the same thing, looking at the degrees of Uranus and when we might be on that timeline in our current epoch. Okay. And the other thing I just want to point out why these are considered the biggest wars. You can go, this is from a website called Gettysburg Flag Works. This is their statistics. Okay. These would have to be double checked, of course. I'm kind of trusting them, but service members versus ratio of the population versus population ratio, 5.7%. So there's the 3 largest with this ratio are the 3 Uranus and Gemini wars. That's when I say the largest wars in American history, because sometimes you tell people this and they push back and they say, America's always at war. Yes, that's true, but these are the 3 biggest and most important and profound wars. And that's a distinction that's important to make. Okay, so when did it begin? April 1775, it was Uranus at 0 degrees. I'm going to 0 degrees, 33 degree minutes Gemini. On our timeline, exact degree return, the first one, July 2025, the last one, May 2026. 2025, 2026 is going to become huge. You're going to see this, continually seeing this in the talk. 3 September, this is when the Revolutionary War ends, that Treaty of Paris date, Uranus 11 degrees in Cancer. So that's 2035, 2036. Again, we're pushed into the 2030s for some of these resolutions based on the Uranus cycle, as well as the Pluto cycle. Constitution ratified, Uranus was at 28 degrees Cancer, and that's October 2038, July 2039 of the current epoch. I'm just going to keep pushing you all, so we'll have time later. I'm going to stop and we can talk at length, but I want to get all of this out. 7 July 2025 through 20 May 2023. This is really important because this is when both Uranus will be in Gemini and Pluto to Aquarius. The last time both of those planets were in those 2 signs was during the Revolutionary War. So we have a doubling up of the resonance. It's not just Uranus and Gemini, it's also Pluto and Aquarius. Of course, we already looked at that in this talk, but it's worth noting when you see piling up of cycles, it tends to make us perk up and say, well, hey, maybe there is more of a likelihood of something like this happening. All right. Let's skip to Civil War next. U.S. Civil War began on 12 April 1861. Uranus was at 9 degrees of Gemini. On our current timeline, this puts us August 2027, May 2028. Civil War ended while Uranus was still in Gemini, June 2032, April 2033. Look at the ratio for the American Civil War. It was 11.1% service members to population. That's pretty large. It was double that of the Revolutionary War. A lot of the country was wrapped up in the war. Of course, makes sense. It's a civil war. Here was the Reconstruction Amendments. This is kind of the end of the Civil War in one way to look at it because of the legal changes that prevented the war from and effectively ended the underlying rationale for the war, at least a large part of it. These are the amendments that gave genuine interracial democracy and allowed that to flourish for the first time in American history. This is a summarizer from Brave Browser. So I know, This is the whole topic, and we can debate all that, and there's huge problems in that framing, I'm sure, but we're moving fast. This is just really high level. 13th Amendment, 6 December 1865, Uranus, 2 degrees of Cancer, so 2033, 2034. 14th Amendment in 1868, 13 degrees of Cancer, 2035, 2036, and the 15th Amendment, 1870, and we're deep into Uranus and Cancer, 2036, 2037. All right, let's keep pushing. The Civil War, this is a key thing to note. It also began, I'm not going to talk much about Neptune, but Neptune was right the last day of Neptune in Pisces in 1861 was the day that the US Civil War began. And so that if we run this same degree model of prediction, just looking at Neptune, we're in March 2025, January 2026 as the wide range of when Neptune is going to return a few times to that degree. So that actually puts us back into 2025, 2026. Whereas with the Civil War, when you look at the Uranus cycle, you're pushed into 2027 for that trigger. Okay, let's keep going. Now to World War II, invasion of Poland, 1 September 39. Uranus was way earlier. So the war in Europe began while Uranus was in Taurus. We've already had one hit with that. That started in July 2023. So we just have started that. And then there will be a few more hits of Uranus here, the last one being April 2024. Obvious resonance we're already living through. This is actually a great chart example because you have a war in the same part of Europe, Eastern Europe, dealing with the same countries right there with that Uranus return. Now, it didn't start exactly July 2023, started February 2022, but it's still active here during this time and escalating and all of it. So it really makes us perk up here as astrologers, like, whoa, it's already here as some kind of resonance. Pearl Harbor happens 2 years later, 7 December 1941. Uranus was still in Taurus, but it had entered Gemini, and then it came back into Taurus. And so on our timeline, that puts us as May 2025, February 2026. But the September 2024 retrograde station of Uranus is right near, it doesn't hit that exact degree minute, but it's in the same degree. So maybe that's important. World War II ends in 1945. So again, while Uranus is in Gemini, Uranus doesn't even work through Gemini before that war ends. And that's something to consider. It's like a flash only in Uranus in that first half of Gemini, and then it's over. But you get 17 degrees of Gemini. So this is Victory in Asia Day. July 2029, May 2030. So just on our timeline, again, it's like these late 2020s. It's not till we get into those 2030s when we start talking about, rebuilding fully. Look at the World War II ratio, 12.2%. This war, in terms of American population versus service members, was the largest in American history. Okay. New institutions after World War II. UN Charter took effect with Uranus 17 degrees Gemini in October 1945. That puts us on July 2029, May 2030. Bretton Woods was ratified. This is the IMF and the World Bank new financial system. June 2029, March 2030 on our timeline. And then NATO. This one might be very important because NATO is playing a huge role now. That was founded all the way in 1949 for April. Uranus was right at the end of Gemini, 26 degrees, 55 degree minutes. But on our timeline, it's September 2031, June 2032. And I think with NATO, Uranus had come into Cancer, already came into Cancer. So this was like the beginning, or like with Pearl Harbor, Uranus went into Gemini, came back into Taurus. NATO was founded after Uranus had first entered Cancer. Remember, Cancer is like the home. So it's like new home, breakthroughs in the new home, which is why I think we've seen this rebuilding phase often with Uranus and Cancer. All right. So let's just, here's the takeaways. This is my main takeaway of all this. All right. 2025 and 2026 look very, very, very rough. Very, 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 you could put like as many varies as you want by all of these cycles we've just looked at. And we're going to look at one more that confirms this. And so it's a possible trigger year for whatever the Uranus and Gemini period is going to be. We're now on the cusp, and we're looking at 2023. We're sitting here and we're on the cusp of some potential wild stuff that's about to go down, all right, in America in terms of war, potentially. Remember what I said at the beginning, maybe it's digital war on the mind, war in these digital realms. I hope so. Uranus and Cancer, of course, is the new institutions form that will define the new cycle. That's the summary here. And the Pluto and Aquarius degrees also fit the same thing of like it's 2030s as the rebuild and the new institutions. It's the rest of the 2020s as this major trigger. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. What are some possible new institutions that could be built? Well, look around. Sustainable Development UN goals, transforming our world, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Quote, 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets. Quote, the scale and ambition of this new universal agenda. So there's stuff that's already being talked about. This is highly controversial. 15-minute cities, no meat, no cars. I mean, I'm not even trying to get into those debates, but just know, I think it's a kind of new digital regimes are certainly what's already being set up. And I think will definitely be part of whatever emerges. You have the Great Reset. This is from the World Economic Forum website. They published this during the pandemic years. It was Professor Klaus Schwab, founder and executive of the World Economic Forum. This is a quote from him about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is another kind of thing that they've branded. We stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has ever experienced before. I think we have to consider the kind of digital transformations that are happening as part of whatever those Uranus and Cancer, Pluto and Aquarius rebuilds are going to be. You've got the EU introduced a new digital ID during pandemic years. Your digital app will contain your ID. The World Economic Forum back in 2016 had a blueprint for digital identity, and you can see now it's coming to fruition, that blueprint. WHO and EU partnered recently to combine the digital ID for those new WHO health treaties. Social credits, all of that is part of what's going to come on the horizon. At least there's going to be a big attempt to bring all this into reality. And, I'm trying to set aside my opinions. I'm just trying to understand what's coming. What is the air element? Where you have age of air, Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions until 2159. It's digitization. So, I mean, we're going to have our lives digitized. And, there's a lot of upsides to it. I encourage you to think not only about the downsides, the dystopian kind of control grid, but also the upsides. Like, I'm getting to talk to however many people here from all over the world. This is all age of air upsides. So nothing's ever only good or only bad. I still use cash all the time as a matter of course. There's some movements in Ireland I was just reading about to keep cash alive. I recommend that personally, but let me come out of my personal recommendations. Let's just keep going here. Bitcoin. Hyper Bitcoinization. Okay, this is something that's maybe emerging here. Quote, this is from the Bitcoin Magazine article. Quote, the advantages of a borderless, censorship-resistant, and natively digital system for transacting value, the replacement of our world's ingrained financial institutions and world powers with a more equitable, publicly driven system. Pluto and Aquarius, right? The so-called contemporary or more modern associations with Aquarius as being decentralized power and more power of the people. You're looking at something maybe like Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin will continue to be relevant. BlackRock may already be the third largest Bitcoin holder in the world. So big players are adopting now and may have created Bitcoin. There's a whole theory about, did the NSA create Bitcoin? And here's quote, and form an NSA analysis. I would say it this way: they absolutely have the capability. I've gone down this rabbit hole. I think there's some likelihood that basically it's this is kind of the new Aquarian global world. And whether it's Bitcoin or stable coins or central bank digital currencies, these are a big part of what will replace the US dollar regime. All right, let's keep going. Starting in 2023 and completing in 2026, all of the outer planets will have changed signs. First ingress. So we had Saturn in Pisces, Saturn in Aries in 2025, Pluto in Aquarius 2023, Jupiter in Cancer 2025, and then in Leo 2026. 2025 sees both Neptune in Aries and Uranus in Gemini first time. So keep that in mind. Just the sheer number of planets all changing signs and where we are now, it signifies major symbolic total transformation. And we're on the cusp. This window just opened with Pluto in Aquarius 2023, Saturn in Pisces. And it's only going to get more dynamic and more intense in my view. All right, the Anaretic degree, 29th degree. This is a book by Helen Adams Garrett, published by the AFA. Can't get enough attitude, too much or too little. That's her basic delineation of the Anaretic degree. Too much, it's like too much time in a sign. It's just too much. I think about like overflowing cup of water, too much water. The other delineation I like with the Anaretic degree is that this is from astrologer Veris Zoltan, Find Your Way Through the Stars, 2011. They say, so any planets, angles, or celestial bodies placed within a range are likely to develop extreme attribute to the sign or planet. So it's like this extreme kind of unstable time. Look what happens. There's two pockets I want to make you aware of. and 2 September 2024, both Pluto and Uranus at the Anaretic degree. No, this is sorry, Pluto and Neptune. Let me write this so we correct this real time. Pluto and Neptune Anaretic in September 2024. And then you have Uranus and Neptune Anaretic for a full month, 8 November through 2 December 2025. So this is the period I've highlighted that I think could be potentially the most unstable of everything we're going into, is this particularly the 2025 one, because of all the dates we've already seen that point to 2025, late 2025. All right, I'm going to keep going. We're going to get through this, and then we'll stop for questions. Almost there. Visible eclipses in the U.S. This is the next section. All right, Ben Dykes taught me this technique. He teaches the technique using April 1912 solar eclipse in Europe to predict a World War I outbreak. Look at the map. This was that eclipse running right through Europe. There's where Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, just south of the eclipse, so not even on the direct eclipse path. He runs the Ptolemy technique. It's a mathematical calculation. Here's Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos, the Ashman translation. Just a quick summary. I love Ptolemy. I love this translation. Ptolemy says the strongest and principal cause of all these events exists in the ecliptical conjunctions of the sun and moon. That's eclipses. And the several transits made by the planets during those conjunctions. Basically, he says eclipses are the most important thing. Always pay attention to eclipses. Okay, so let's walk through another background for this eclipse story. Robert Zoeller's famous 9/11 prediction. He predicted 9/11 using the eclipse technique. It's somewhat opaque exactly how he did it. But here is the August 1999 solar eclipse. It barely came into, it was barely visible in parts of America there. And here's a quote from Zoeller from his newsletter. He says, the next 12 months in full, we'll see an increased tension in those countries that fell into the path of the August 1999 eclipse. But after the end of August 2001, this will take on a new twist, and it will be the last 6 months of the eclipse effect that will be worst. After September 2001, when the first big crisis will have hit the U.S., the world will never be the same again, or we will never be the same again. So he got it dead on using the eclipse technique, and it was probably some form of this Ptolemaic thing, is my guess. If you look at the August 1999 eclipse chart, it's nasty for Washington, D.C. It's about as nasty as I've seen. I pulled this up recently. I was so shocked. Saturn, 5 degrees from the midheaven. Mars, exactly opposite Saturn, partile and applying. Mars on the IC. All angular, whole sign houses, squaring the sun and moon. I mean, this is as nasty as you'll ever get. And I think this had to have been part of his prediction. He was looking at the Washington, D.C. eclipse chart and was saying, listen, man, this solar eclipse is going to be nasty, 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 and probably applied some of those Ptolemaic timing techniques. I'm sure he was using other stuff, ingresses and all kinds of other ancient mundane techniques. Okay, let's keep pushing. There was 3 eclipses in America, 3 visible, 2017, 2023, the one we're about to have, and then 2024. I'm going to run these Ptolemaic timing techniques on those eclipses, and it's going to show you some cool stuff. All right. You run those models. I'm not going to teach that. Go to Ben Dykes. You can watch his how to edit that or how to make that. But when I run it, and I've done my little tweak that gets a little bit more specific because I run it down to days. Dykes kind of runs it on months. It's not that different, but the peak of this great American eclipse from 2017 would have been using Ptolemy, 8 March 2019 through 14 October 2019. That's the peak. What happened? Assange was arrested. Trump entered the Korea demilitarized zone. U.S. withdrew from that treaty with Russia, one of the nuke treaties. But these are the 2 key. Pelosi impeached Trump, classic eclipse signification, right? The sun is eclipsed, the leader is fallen. So Pelosi announced that Trump impeachment inquiry during that peak. And then Epstein was arrested and, quote, didn't kill himself. Now that's a joke or playing on that commentary. Did he or did he not? That's the meme, right? He did kill himself. But the Epstein stuff to me was always the most important because that showed the underbelly of the dark kind of darkness in America. Elites, basically pedophile elites and controlling people through, major financial blackmail, that whole, operation. If you go to that eclipse chart, you had Mars in the 9th. This was maybe one of the most interesting parts. Mars was damaging here. Ancient texts will tell you Mars in the 9th is blasphemy. That fits Epstein. Saturn squared the midheaven pretty close. And I think that has, from the first, I think that has the nature of like the dark self and how that might have been part of the kind of Epstein delineation too. That Saturn was ruled by Jupiter in the 11th, right? Echelons of power. So that's my delineation with that one. But the point is the timing hit. It was a great example of the timing hitting. All right, here's the eclipse we're about to experience, October 2023. Ptolemaic technique, you run it. The peak will be 3 May 2025 through November 2025. Again, late November, late 2025, pardon me. This technique says that's when a peak moment may happen. It fits with that timing from those 2 cycles we looked at, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune. Look at this eclipse chart. This is what has me kind of worried. So you have Mars in Scorpio has joined the midheaven. And when you look at Dykes, what he does is he just says, where is Mars? What planet is most angular is how he phrases that. That is to say, which planet is closest to the angles, the midheaven and the ascendant, IC or descendant. Clear it's Mars in Scorpio, no doubt. That's not good. It supports like war actions. Okay, strong Mars. Now, some people might say, well, Mars has dignity. Yeah, maybe there's some kind of victory or something for someone is going to have a victory, but strong Mars, just go pick up Dorotheus. And he's like, Mars with dignity, horrible. So it's the debate in the ancient tradition. Do you want it with dignity or not? Sometimes you don't want Mars with dignity if that means war is unleashed. Mars rules the first house by exaltation, Capricorn by exaltation. Look at this chart though, too. You've got Saturn opposite Venus, and then Mars opposite Jupiter, kind of a wide or. Both of the benefics are harmed by the malefics by opposition. I don't like that at all about this chart. It's not altogether easy, this chart at all. Is it as harsh as 1999? I don't think so, but it still has me really worried that the eclipse timing technique shows us too some not good stuff. It's confirming that stuff from earlier in the cycle. Let me keep pushing. We're going to get there with some time for some questions. So this next eclipse is April 2024, total solar eclipse. The 2023 is annular. This is total. You run the Ptolemaic math, it's 6 October 2025 to 4 April 2026, again in that same zone. And so it fits with the timing we've already seen. Look at this chart. This is a lot easier, but you do have Mars and Saturn closely joined in Pisces in the 8th house, and they're not angular to anything else. And I'm just looking at 7 traditional here. That's the way, I was taught from Ben. So that's what I do. Economic shocks. This would be a project to go put other planetary points. Maybe there's some more information here, but I think this 8th house malefic conjunction is telling us that this might be when you have real economic shots, inflation, bond markets, triggers for the next new currency regimes, collapse of the dollar regime, etc. That's that 8th house malefic conjunction. All right. I'm going to keep pushing. We're going to get done here. We're going to get finished. 6 October 2025. This zone, 6 October 2025 through 20 November 2025. Both of the eclipses, the October 2023 and the April 2024, both have, using the Ptolemaic math, that as the peak for both. So there's an overlapping shared peak with both of those eclipses. And remember, this is when it wasn't Uranus and Neptune. Yeah, it was. This is when both Uranus and Neptune were also anaretic, starting on the 8th of November. So I think November 2025, like to summarize, if I had to say, when is I'm the one I'm going to be most now aware of to kind of be watching the news, that's that pocket for me as eclipse timing hits and then as the anaretic outer planets hit. Okay. Really quick, look at the crossing path of these 2 eclipses, the 2023 and 2024, right in southern Texas near the border. Look at the story that's emerging just now. Greg Abbott tweeted, Texas installed razor wires in Eagle Pass. Biden admin cut the wires, and then they installed more immediately. It's an example. And then you go here, World News Tonight, ABC World News, the record number of border crossings in the U.S., 142,000. In first half of September alone. So there's, as these eclipses hit right there, and there's this whole border issue. Eclipses can be localized in their effect as well. And I want to just point that out. Okay, let me just keep shifting here. The next and last section, or second to last section, the Saturn-Jupiter clock in the 1960s. Now we're going to start getting into some of the positive stuff because I want to try to end with that positivity. So Saturn and Jupiter, they repeat in the same signs together every 59 and a half years. Puts us in the mid-1960s. Remember what happened then, new creative technologies, electronics, color TV, spiritual and peace movements, all kinds of that things of that nature. This is my favorite metaphor for the 1960s. You started with a Saturn-driven reckoning at the beginning of the decade, and you have the first Beatles album, Black and White, right? Saturn. This was the day of the Kennedy assassination. They released with the Beatles. And so it's a Saturn-driven reckoning, Saturn, Aquarius, Jupiter, and Aries. By the time you get to 67, you had this full color expression, Sgt. Pepper's, the masterpiece, right? And you have Saturn and Aries, Jupiter and Leo. The fiery Saturn is weak, and you have that heart-driven Jupiter and Leo. We're in a similar cycle. We've had our Saturn-driven reckoning, if you think about the COVID years being that. And now we're kind of having these kind of creative outpourings according to the Saturn-Jupiter clock. We're setting up for that. Andre Barbeau, the basket, arrives in July 2026. This is the Barbeau outer planets in the elegant configuration. You can see it here, all trines and sextiles, except for Jupiter opposite Pluto. And this is what Barbeau says is the period of crisis in 2020 is resolved in 2026. This is quoting Barbeau. When Uranus becomes sextile to Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, and trine Pluto and Aquarius, we will then have 9 ascending cycles in the most beautiful configuration of the 21st century. Take a look at it again. Look how beautiful that is. Just beautiful. And he says the New World civilization, whose beginnings appeared around the year 2000, is taking off here. The entry into the second quarter of the century bears a stamp to the achievement of the new age of humanity. The central and harmonic position of Saturn, Neptune is above all expressive of the promotion of the lower strata of the world population and a rise in the standard of living of the underprivileged. He's very bullish on Saturn, Neptune. Summer of Love, June 1967. This was the summer of love in San Francisco. Look where Jupiter is in Leo, and look where Saturn is in Aries. This is in the basket, Barbeau's basket. What is the fire element? Lust for life, passion, creative genius, all of those things. So to me, this is a great balm as we get here into 2026, 2025. Know that we can kind of center these sort of peace movements, the pure creative human spirit, the fire of life, and just kind of go into reality and embrace reality in a really profound way. I mean, the summer of love social phenomenon, young people, part of the hippie movement. I mean, the ideals of this, the idea of peace, the bed-ins and things of John Lennon. I know that happened later. All right, this is another key point. In the basket, Barbeau's basket, you have Saturn and Neptune. They will conjoin, both in Aries. They will conjoin actually in February. This is the first time Saturn and Neptune have conjoined in the first degree of the zodiac, which is Aries 1, since 4361 BC. Okay, what happened then? Proto-Indo-European language emerges. It's the beginning of kind of this new technology, language itself, that is important for the development of humanity. I think this is another saving balm. What if Neptune and Saturn conjoining in Aries 1 is there's foundational revelations, and we get AI, aliens, deeper understanding of reality in a new core way, and that somehow rescues us from the potential of the warring, right? That this Neptune Saturn does something that changes everybody and everything, and that's part of this kind of moment that we're going to come into. Barbeau's planetary cyclic index, we're rising now. The bottom happened in 2022. I've calculated it to the day, and now we're rising up. And so we continue rising. The next peak happens right as Pluto leaves Aquarius and Uranus enters, Leo. And so, yes, there's going to be another little trough here in 2033, but we're basically rising, which in the Barbeau system, the higher you go, the better. The lower you go, the more that you have crisis. So, he says that everything's expanding, or basically in some new kind of special new age in 2026. So it's just kind of mixed testimony, right? Because you look at all those other cycles and it's crisis in 2025, 2026, and the rebuild happens in the 2030s. Barbeau is more bullish on that elegant outer planet configuration as somehow maybe preventing the worst. And I am hoping for that Barbeau to be correct. All right. I'm going to keep pushing here. I know we don't have that much time. Cat's cradle. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so there's 2 periods of cardinal eclipses in the 1960s. I'm back on the Jupiter-Saturn clock. They were 1962 to 64, JFK assassination and aftermath, cardinal eclipses. And then the eclipse cycle we're on now, the nodal return, which you have North Node in Aries, 67 through 69, RFK assassination, MLK assassination, both in the 68 election season. Next year's election season is also the same Venus star point at 68, and the nodal return and cardinal eclipses. And so what I'm looking at, this is just more of a sub point, but I think that the 2004 election cycle could be wild with those resonances. Cardinal eclipses, cardinal signs change reality, initiate change in reality. And it's angular to Sibley Pluto and the stellium in the Sibley chart, the Cancer stellium, and Saturn in the Sibley chart. Okay, look at this. There's calls already for Joe Biden to step aside. The president has no business running for office at age 80. Now, of course, there's Dark Brandon memes, and he's like, I'm not even trying to take a position on whether he should or shouldn't, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does, because the first series of cardinal eclipses in 1963, LBJ became president, right, because of the tragedy of the Kennedy assassination. That was a year before the election, less than a year. Then less than a year before the 1968 election, in March 1968, LBJ resigned. And so we are not even yet into that zone of window where it's before the election, the cardinal eclipse election, you have the resignation of the president. This is that the other point about eclipses being local triggers, not just the Ptolemaic timing. Look at the eclipse, 28 March 1968, Washington, D.C. 3 days later, LBJ appeared on national television and says he's decided to resign, not seek the party's nomination because of Vietnam. Actually, the full rationale of it's a research project. But okay, now I want to finish the talk about some of the psychological fitness and spiritual preparation for this period that we're about to enter into. This is a quote from The Matrix Reloaded. You didn't come here to make the choice. You've already made it. So you're here to try to understand why you've made it. And I think this is important to think about when we think about fate. I mean, we're here, we're all here. So we're here to see this, to witness whatever this is going to be. And, I just think that it's like seeking deeper understanding of the nature of being and self. Basically, our spiritual truth of reality is the way to begin thinking about processing this. I want to go to Firmicus Maternus. And this is my read, the majesty of astrology confirms the divine. And so we can turn our souls to the divine as a refuge during these times. Look at Firmicus Maternus. This is in Matthias, book 8, chapter 1. He says, otherwise we may lose our souls if they are forgetful of their divine creation, becoming entrapped in vicious desires and are finally cast over the precipice. Firmicus Maternus is one of the most important ancient astrologers, Roman attorney, wrote in Latin. Got a foundational text called Matthias. It's like 8 books on astrology. Keeping and going here, paragraph 7, the principles of the Matthias will give us a small intimation of the divine knowledge and lead us to the secrets of our source. Occupied with this holy doctrine, we turn our souls towards heavenly powers and initiate them into divine rights. And then continuing, we do not shrink from dangers once foretold. By recollection of its majesty, our souls have formed themselves to withstand these things. We are not overcome by bad fortune. So keep that in mind. Astrology itself, like the elegance and the beauty of these cycles, is pointing, in my view, to a divine truth and reality. And we need to center God and, whatever your conception of that is, and consider divine love. My particular practice, and I want to share this, is called metta. It's from the Buddhist tradition, Theravada Buddhist tradition. And I basically am focused on, in my heart as much as I can be. May all beings be happy. May they be joyous and live in safety. This is the sutta, as they say, and you can just basically meditate on these basically mantras. I found it to be huge for my own kind of spiritual development, and even my work as an astrologer, to center the heart center and center love. And I think that fits with this 2026 moment where you have Jupiter and Leo. Remember, zodiac man, Leo is the heart. It's the summer of love. And to me, we all need to be increasing the capacity of the heart and the love that we can share in our present moment, day to day, as we get into this very dynamic time. Finally, I'll just say quantum theory demonstrates that observation affects reality. Part of my hope, too, by talking about this is that we can see these cycles. We may change them just by being aware of them. It's one of the great powers of astrology. Awareness is power. So if enough of us start saying, hey, look at this, maybe it will not be three, it'll be 3 for 4, not 4 for 4, with some kind of big Uranus and Gemini crisis, because we're aware now. We can talk about it. Finally, let's remember the ISAR ethical standards. Astrology is not an exact science. Astrological variables can manifest in differing events of similar meaning. And then here's my YouTube channel, SJ Anderson 144. You can sub to me there. I talk about a lot of this stuff and do more just kind of delineation for more interpersonal navigation, as well as mundane work on that YouTube channel. So you can find me there, and my website, sjanderson144.com. You can schedule natal readings with me there. All right, so I'm going to pause, and we've got time for some questions. Do you want to come in here, Wade, or should I try to navigate these, or what's your sense?
Hey, well, we can go ahead and scroll back and see where there might be some questions. There's a lot of comments here. I think they're mostly comments having come in. Feel free to, kind of scroll through the chat.
Okay, I'm going to scroll up. If anybody wants to rewrite a new question here, I'm looking at it now, and I can field it as well.
Yeah, what might help is I'll go through. If I see a question, I'll put a flag on it.
Okay, and thanks everybody. I just had to speed through that. That's kind of how I like to work with this stuff, is just dump as much as I can, and then you can process it later. Um, any questions from anybody? Just go ahead and type one in if you've got one here. I'm going to scroll. Amazing presentation. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Appreciate that. How to get PDF. I don't have a PDF. I can export this right now as a PDF, and Joe, just message me, and I'll send you the PDF of these slides. Yep. You can get my email on my website, sjanderson144.com. Just message me and I'll send it to you. Okay, great presentation. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Appreciate that. Glad you could make it. Glad to be here. I'm gonna love info dumps. Thank you so much. Yeah, okay, yeah, Jada, yeah, just dump dump it out, and then anybody can message me at any time. On X, Twitter, you can message me there. Email me too if there's later questions when you're watching the record. I'm very much responsive to people. May take some time, but I'm responsive. Caroline, thank you. Bye to you.
Great. Okay, well, I don't see any. Okay, here we go.
Best ideas to protect family during this pivot. I can't really advise on that. I just say pray and then go research other experts. I mean, you can type into ChatGPT or just pray. Basically, is my main message here. That's the essential core. Is spirituality, loving heart, expanding the loving heart. This trumps astrology, comes before astrology, in my view. And you'll be led by your own divine, inspiration to what you need to be led. That's all I can say. Really great. I'd love to have a listen again and fully process. Yep, I recommend that. Thank you, Dale. Do you think replacement of dollar dominance will be a basket of currencies or crypto? I don't know. The BRICS are going to run probably, I think it'll be digitized one way or the other, but the BRICS are very much into hard assets. That's the bounty of the BRICS. It's oil and gold. They've been buying gold and oil, and they have the oil producers. There's some wisdom in that, connecting the currency to the tangible things, because then it can't be just printed out of thin air by whoever controls the process. So it's a little bit more equitable in a certain way. That's what some people say, at least. And I think it'll be some form of stable coin, digitized, maybe attachment to hard assets, is my view. And Bitcoin is, of all the crypto, Bitcoin is a hard asset because it's connected to computer processing, which requires energy. So of all of them, any kind of proof of work coin is going to be more like a commodity in the traditional sense. I think Bitcoin will be playing a role no matter what. But I think it also could be nation to nation different, because you're going to have different policies, different, legislators, different, localized choices that get made. One would think presenters all colluded to give us an interwoven presentation. If that wouldn't be just totally impossible. I didn't even talk to anybody else, Lori. I'm sure that's what astrologers do. We tend to kind of tap into things, and then there's similar resonance. So I'm glad to hear that you found that there was some interwoven stuff here, because that means maybe we're all doing something right, hopefully. Feeling very excited and hopeful after this. Very helpful. Thank you. Great, Erica. Glad to hear that. Carmen, thank you. Heart to you. Thank you, Christine. Okay, we've got about, 2-3 minutes. Anybody else? No, basis of money is trust in people, not oil. Okay, Rick, I'm not sure. Basis of money is trust. That's true. It's all about the monopoly of violence, the government that can control the violence and then enforce whatever the policy is determined to be of what is the exchange of value in a given system. So I would agree with that too. Well, I think there can make some sense to tie it to hard assets. That's a whole debate. I mean, I'll let those policymakers debate it. The monopoly of violence, Rick, is just a phrase that it's how governments operate. So I don't mean literal violence. I mean the idea, the principle. It's an abstract principle of how what gives the government the ability to enforce within its jurisdiction the edicts that it decides to implement. Just you can read about it. It's a conceptual thing in government theory and legal theory. Okay. Wonder how an increasing Sino-Indian conflict would affect the BRICS. Yeah, that's a whole wild thing. And, just like in World War II, you had different alliances that appeared at the beginning of the crisis to exist. So, Germany and Russia, for example, that by the end of the crisis, totally had rearranged themselves. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all to see like this, like either China or India break off from the BRICS or join a new Western version of the institutions. I mean, I think everything is almost in play. And in fact, I think Russia and America potentially could actually come back together. I know that sounds crazy, but when you look at the history of Uranus and Gemini, Russia has actually helped America almost every time in one way or the other. And so that's something to just keep in mind. I'm kind of trying to add more of that. I'm going to do a whole video on it because I'm trying to like break away from this idea of like the big bad enemy, and I want to try to kind of untangle some of that. And I think there's reasons there. Okay, last question, then I'm going to turn it over to you, Wade. Will inflation be the primary tool to erase the enormous debt of the U.S.? I don't know about inflation. What I think, Joe, is that a new system like where you have a hard asset like Bitcoin or like a stable coin, what'll happen is that new, like Bitcoin, for example, that's what why I had that hyper Bitcoinization slide. Because as you debase the currencies, people will flood to buy Bitcoin or whatever it's going to be. And Rick, you're wrong about that. In my opinion, it is one of the hardest assets that has ever been constructed. But you'll have people racing to buy the Bitcoin because it can't be inflated. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Or other digital models that get created to replace the fiat currency regimes that we've been living in heretofore. All right, Wade, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you very much. And
Perfect. All right, thank you so much, SJ. I appreciate all the research and time that you put into building this. And as you can see, there was a pretty warm response and lots of ideas floating around. It's always good when people say they want to come back to process later. So thank you so much, everyone. We're going to go ahead and close the room.